Hello and welcome to another episode of A Single Window. So today we're going to address a question that has never really been sufficiently answered for anybody that's listened to one other person's response. So the question is, what is love? So first, I feel it's important to kind of illustrate that this isn't really about this question. This is about a nebulous concept that is very difficult to uh, put a finger on as far as what it is. And that's more what this inquiry is going to be about, not so much about love itself. So, what's going to help us understand this, though, and what I'm going to be trying to show you, is to first kind of at least think of it yourself and what your own position would be. So, we have here a definition, and rather base one, I would say. So, first one is a noun, which is an intense feeling of deep affection. And the second one is a great interest and pleasure in something. So both kind of go hand in hand. It's a noun because it's a sort of solidified idea of what the feeling is more than anything else. And then the verb form is a deep or romantic or sexual attachment to someone. So the verb is more the act of it itself, and that is in its own somewhat important. And we'll explain why here in a moment. Okay, so the piece we're going to investigate here in order to help us understand this better is from the Guardian International Edition, and it was just a very basic premise for giving five people. We can kind of see the names on the bottom here. So the five people being these people down here. They each had to give their own position on what they believed it was. And this was actually from a few years ago, but it's something I've used a lot. I think it really works well for what we're going to be discussing. So let's begin. Okay, so our first person that is going to be trying to give us a definition of what he believes love to be is a physicist. And he says, his title of his sort of excerpt here is called Love is Chemistry. So he says, biologically, love is a powerful neurological condition like hunger or thirst, only more permanent. We talk about love being blind or unconditional in the sense that we have no control over it. But then it is not so surprising since love is basically chemistry. While lust is a temporary passionate desire involving an increased release of chemicals such as testosterone, estrogen, in true love or attachment and bonding, the brain can release a whole set of chemicals: pheromones, dopamine, neodeprine, serotonin, oxytocin, and vasopressin. However, from an evolutionary perspective, love can be viewed as a survival tool, a mechanism that we have evolved to promote long-term relationships, mutual defense, and parental support of children, and to promote feelings of safety and security. So basically, for him, it's just survival. So, because of the way nature is and the way that people had to survive at one time when we were a little more primal, we had to have this sort of chemistry within our brain that would work together in order for us to bond with each other. Because a group of animals has a better chance, especially mammals, has a better chance surviving as a group than would a single one. So it's important to have these connections, and they're supported by just passive chemistry, as he's basically saying. So for him, we can just kind of look at the brain, and we can say, okay, well, there's a bunch of things happening in here that are leading or precursors to make this happen, regardless really of if you want it to or not. This is just a way of survival. That's all it's really about. So I'm maybe reducing it a little bit, but that's the main premise. Okay, so our next person is a psychotherapist. So she says love has many guises. So for this particular one, I'm not going to go through every single one, everything she says. But I'll just kind of give a very basic overview saying that she says there's all these different types, and I think she has 6 types. So philia, which they saw as a deep, so she's relating this to the ancient Greeks too, which is interesting because mostly related everything we talked about so far to the ancient Greeks, and I'll continue to do so. So it's interesting she's doing the same thing here. Uh, saw a deep and usually non-sexual intimacy between close friends, and then ludus describes a more playful affection like flirting. Pragma is mature love that is between long-term couples and sort of has this commitment aspect to it, where it's a interrelationship and you have trust in each other and you feel connection with each other because of a shared history. And then agape, which is a more generalized love, but for all humanity. Felucia, I'm not sure how you say that, is self-love, which isn't as selfish as it sounds, she says. So it's just kind of a generalized love of yourself, kind of be a positive self-image, you could say. And let's see what Aristotle says here. Aristotle discovered, and any psychotherapist will tell you in order to others that you need to be able to take care of yourself first. Lastly, the most possibly, even though it causes most trouble, is eros. Eros is sexual passion. So this is what makes the rest of our brains kind of shut down and sort of you do anything to sort of try to fulfill it. It's keep in mind here. This is I'm going to do a little foreshadowing. It's interesting that Aristotle is the one she talks about here, because this is if you remember the picture from last day, he was the one that took externals. So it's very interesting that we come up here again. So love is all of the above, she says, but it's possibly unrealistic to expect to experience all 6 types with one person. This is why family and community are important. So for her, it's kind of centered, it's kind of centered around one person. So if we choose one person in our picture here, we'll say this lady, that's the closest one here. So we'll say, okay, it's more about her. And then it's what she needs out of this situation. So she has all these relatives and people that she lives her life with, and they're just all giving her those basic 6 needs that she needs as a person to survive. So she needs lots of different people that maybe one person can't be all those things to her. So she needs to have reinforcement with all these people in her community in order to get everything she needs for her own self to feel fulfilled, and including loving herself, which was one of the ones that she was talking about. Okay, so our next person is a philosopher. And the philosopher highlights that love is a passionate commitment. And I think it's kind of important to, I'm kind of giving away a little bit of my position here, but it's to highlight this word, commitment. The answer remains elusive in part because love is not one thing. Love for parents, partners, children, country, neighbor, God, and so on have all different qualities. So each has its variance: blind, one-sided, tragic, steadfast, fickle, reciprocated, misguided, unconditional. It is at its best, however, all love is a kind of passionate commitment that we nurture and develop, even though, so let's keep focused on this spot right here. Commitment that we nurture and develop, even though it usually arrives in our lives unbidden. And this is a really interesting sentence. And I would like to talk about this, but we'll maybe talk about it in another episode, because there's too much there to unpack in just this one. That's why it's more than just a powerful feeling. Without the commitment, it's mere infatuation. Without the passion, it's mere dedication. Without nurturing, even the best can wither and die. So Julian here is basically saying that love is this more about the relationship itself. It's more about the connection and the maintaining of the two characters in it, whoever those two might be and whatever they might be filling within each other's needs. It's more about this. It's more about this act, this commitment act of one helping another. So the reason I chose this picture, and maybe it's not the best one to illustrate what I'm trying to get across here, is he kind of looks like he's just doing it to do it. And this dog kind of looks a little bit proud, I guess you could say, and knowing that he's getting what he wants in the situation. So it's this is it though. This is what he's saying that love is this relationship and this nurturing. So the way I've explained this before is it's kind of like you have this plant, which is the relationship, and that's both have to invest in that plant in order to make it grow, and it's this living thing. it is the thing in between. So we can kind of see this getting more to be like a verb. It's more about the thing happening between the two subjects. And our next person is a romantic novelist. So she says that love drives all great stories. What love is depends on where you are in relationship to it, she says. So secure in it, you can feel it as mundane and necessary as air. So you just take it for granted. You exist within it almost unnoticing. Deprived of it, you can feel like an obsession, all consuming, a physical pain. Love is the driver of all great stories, not just romantic love, but the love between a parent and child, for family, for country. It is a point of consum. Okay, so this is where I want us to focus here. Is the point of consummation of it that fascinates. What separates you from love? The obstacles. Before I kind of really don't make a point that I want to make here. The obstacles that stands in his way. It is usually at those points that love is everything. So it's these moments of consummation, almost it happening. It's not the actual happening, like she said before. It's that sort of you just treat it like it's air or food or whatever else. It's not that big a deal. But it's that moment of almost achieving and that sort of striving. So if I'm going to explain hers, I'll give a picture like this. So, and it's really interesting because I think that this dog really does have the look of love in his eyes. Like it's just that fascination, or at least what most of us conceive to be love. And I don't know if that's actually true, what we should be conceiving as love. But this dog has that sort of look in his eye that we have when we think we're in love. More of that eros, like the other lady was saying, is that desire, that primal urge of attack kind of thing. Not necessarily like a menacing attack, but pursual. And the two of them look like they're both enjoying themselves, and they're chasing something that is, in actuality, just a mechanical little rabbit that they have. Is typically what they have when they're doing these dog races. So this is very apt to what she's saying, because she's saying once they catch that rabbit, it would probably ruin the chase. They love what they're doing because they feel like it's in this pursuit that makes that action of loving. Okay, and our last one here is the nun. They call her the nun, a nun. I don't know why the nun. Love is free, yet binds us. So Catherine here has kind of a very different conception. Love is more easily experienced and defined as a theological virtue by which we love God above all things and our neighbors as ourselves for its sake. It seems remote until we encounter it in flesh, so to say, in the life of another, in acts of kindness. So here again, we have this more as a verb. So it's in these acts of, sorry, one moment here. In these acts of kindness, generosity, and self-sacrifice. So she really doesn't include more of the eros kind of one we were talking about before. But love is the one thing that can never be hurt anyone, although it may cost dearly. The paradox of love is that it is supremely free, yet attaches us with bonds stronger than death. It cannot be bought or sold. There is nothing it cannot face. Love is life's greatest blessing. So for her, it is really in these actions. So again, like I say, this is more of the verb form. We notice that those first two are more the person themselves, and then their needs, and then meeting them through these other things. But it's not really the verb form of it. So this is more in the acts themselves that represent love. And we can see people helping animals and people helping people. So what's my point? My point is that we had sort of a divide in there at some point. And it's interesting that was the order they gave it in, because to me it seemed like a progression. And it started at the physicist, who saw love as just this purely biological thing. So we'll say the physicist was here. The next person was the psychotherapist. Like I said, he's going to be another P too. Let's go like this. I hate to leave it there. Don't want to call her psycho. So, and then the next one was the philosopher. Oops, bad. Philosopher. So that's supposed to be an E. And then the next one was a romantic novelist. And then the next one was the nun. Oh, I called her the nun too. So it was a nun. Okay. So this is basically where it became more like subjects and objects and about something internal within the person. With these, there was needs and there was people that needed to meet those needs. And it was really centered on the person outwardly. And then in one, it was more like filling the biological needs. And then in the psychotherapist, it was more like these were just needs that everybody had. And then we had more than we thought. And we had to just meet those in our own way. Whereas the philosopher, the romantic novelist, and the nun really had it as a verb, as something that you do, as something that is an action that is done in the spirit of it, you could say. So this one's more. I know this is going to be a little bit of a stretch right now, but this is more in the matter realm, and this is more in the mind realm. And the reason why this is important is because this is exactly what we were talking about before. We have this big nebulous concept, which is love, and then we're trying to define it through all these different windows. And each of these people are wanting to prove their own position correct, their larger position. And love fits into that as a construct that works for their whole system that they have. And I don't want to get too much into that right now, but just know that that's, I mean, I would make a pretty strong argument that that's what they're doing. And what we should be doing, as we were saying, is combining the two. And this is really, our brain is set up in the same way as well. And in actuality, all these should be nested in here as well. These are all true. And we'll explain this a little bit better in a second here. But when we do, this is how our brain works as well, right? We have one side that's sort of logical, rational, and the other side, which is this artistic, creative side. And depending on what these people were trying to prove, they were going from one side as a dominant side. And the point is we need both. And that may seem obvious at this point, but it's really important that we reinforce this in many ways. So we'll leave with an analogy here. So this kind of stuff, especially these big terms such as love, they often compare them to the blind men and the elephant. And this is not particularly my favorite picture of this, but it gives the idea of what we're trying to get across. So this blind person grabs the elephant's tusk and he says, oh, an elephant is like a spear. It's pointy, it's sharp. This person goes and he goes up to the elephant and he says, oh, elephant is like a hose. It's long and flexible. This person grabs the ear and he says, oh, the elephant is like a carpet. It's long and movable. And this person says the elephant is like a wall. It's flat or fairly flat and solid. This one says the elephant is like a tree. It's long and round. And this one says the elephant is like a rope. It moves and it doesn't have much control over what it moves like. So if we look at this and we think of this just like the people that we had that gave the definitions, all of them are true. I would make the argument that everybody, what they said, I know there's lots of concepts of love in there, but every one of them is true. And they're trying to explain something that can't be with the senses that we have, maybe more explained in a way that can be really comprehended by us. So this is, I think, a pretty apt, it's a very apt analogy of how this works. So each of these people, in order for them to understand what the other is saying, they would have to move to get there. And that's what we're talking about, pulling those two spheres together. So this is hopefully a way to show how we can enact this idea. The next lecture is really going to reinforce exactly how to do that. But for now, we're going to leave it here. So hope to talk to you soon, and I hope you have a good night. Thank you.